is the most powerful tool for manifestation we have. It's already destroying your life right now. And it's also why you can't manifest an energy ball. It's why you can't manifest moving from one place to another with just your thought. It's why you can't manifest flying. Welcome back to the Serenity Journey. My name is James, and here we talk about the spiritual principles that lead you to inner peace and the power of manifestation, and how these manifestations work in breaking free of the misconceptions that are floating around the web. And so I was in a conversation just the other day with somebody we were talking about law of attraction, manifestations, and one of the things that they told me, you have to go out and take action. You can't just sit and meditate and make things happen. I want to say that you are right to a degree, but let's take a step back and look at this thing. You have to be able to think it. You have to imagine it. You have to be able to believe it's possible. Your belief that you have to take action to see the manifestation is why you have to take action to see the manifestation. I've seen other people that didn't take the action, that just meditate, and because they had such a belief in it, it had no choice but to show up in their lives. And I've had things in my own life that I did nothing to make happen, and yet they showed up. Now, one of the things that leads me down this weird rabbit hole, because my brain is, like super 90 miles an hour, being ADHD, and I go way off into tangents. And maybe because I spent too much time watching fantasies. My favorite characters were always the wizards and the people that were able to manifest, because they were the ultimate manifestors. How can we bring that into our reality? Why can't we have that kind of quote-unquote magic? Besides the fact that people are scared of it, the consciousness doesn't allow it. Why don't we have that? Why can't we have that in our reality? Because I believe in magic. I believe in these things. I believe it's real. I don't necessarily think that maybe the fantasy books get it totally right. Maybe there's different rules in different realities, and there's all these different things that we start going into. My brain goes down these weird rabbit holes. So one of the rabbit holes I went down just in the last few days, I mean hours and hours and hours of my brain going into this, by the way. We started thinking about, why can't we just think a thought and manifest it in our lives? And why can't we, if thought is energy, and we can create energy and we can move energy, could we move our bodies from here to there just by thought alone? And then when we start realizing that we have to have a mind that is open to everything, including these weird ideas, and attached to nothing, including the attachment to the belief that it's impossible for these things to happen, I started realizing as we start diving into consciousness, which in the last video we talked about the two levels of consciousness of the mind, which is the conscious and the subconscious. But then we also have to start getting into the spiritual consciousness, and as we get into spiritual consciousness, we realize there's, again, two levels of spiritual mind. You have the collective consciousness, which is what we tap into when we are starting to open our heart chakra. And then we have the superconscious mind. The superconscious mind is what we access when we start getting to the higher chakras, mainly the crown chakra and the third eye chakra. As we develop those and we develop the skills with those, we start accessing universal consciousness. This is where we actually start directly channeling from source energy. Now, that's another deep rabbit hole for another video, but today we're going to talk about the collective consciousness and what it is. When we get into unity consciousness, we can actually tap into the collective consciousness. This is what a lot of psychics do. They're tapping into the collective consciousness. When you get really familiar with the collective unconsciousness and you start tapping into it on a regular basis, and this takes some skill, it's not something that happens overnight when you first do it, you can start honing in and focusing. Okay, I'm going to on this subsect of the collective. You see this a lot with tarot readers, where if you look around, there's a lot of tarot readers that are reading the tarot for, say, Scorpios. And then they do a reading for Aries, because they're tapping into the collective consciousness of that subgroup. But you can tap into the worldwide collective consciousness just as much as you can groups or even individuals. This is how energy healer work remotely. We tap into the collective consciousness remotely, and we're able to send that energy to that very specific person no matter where they're at in the world. So I was thinking about this, and I was like, as we understand this collective consciousness, I was like, on top of the collective consciousness, there's also a collective ego. So we talk about ego consciousness in ourselves, but we also have to realize there's a collective ego, and each group has their own collective ego as we get into group consciousness. And as we look at the chakra settings, we also realize that group consciousness is the second chakra. This is where, as animals, we start becoming herd animals. We run with the pack. We run together. This is where we develop our group consciousness. And there's some people that never move out of that group consciousness. This is why political systems, religious groups are so adamant that their way is the only way, because it's that group ego consciousness around that particular group philosophy. So I started thinking about this as I'm diving into this, and I go down this long rabbit hole for hours and hours and hours. My mind says, well, what if it's the collective consciousness that's saying this is impossible, and that's the only reason why it's impossible? Maybe if we raise the collective consciousness enough, those things could be possible. Maybe the only reason we don't have magic, as it's described in a lot of the fantasy stuff, is because the collective consciousness of the planet as a whole is not high enough in awareness to be able to make that possible. Maybe we could actually evolve to a place where we wouldn't need cars because we could fly everywhere we wanted to go. I'm not saying that this is going to happen. I'm not saying that this is the reality that we have to bring into being, but I'm just saying, is it possible? When you start looking at the teachings of great spiritual teachers worldwide, they almost all say this one thing: with creative energy, all things are possible. So this all, not impossible within source energy. It's only impossible within ego consciousness. So we have to get the collective consciousness out of this ego consciousness in order to be able to express ourselves more fully and maybe realize some of these things. And you can think I'm crazy, it's okay. Our imagination is the most powerful tool for manifestation we have. We have to break free of what we believe is possible and what we believe is not. Dr. Wayne Dyer says, when you believe it, you will see it. So whatever you believe to be true about how this stuff works, you will see that playing out in your life. If you believe you have to take all this action, then you will never be able to manifest anything without that action. But if you believe you can manifest without it, guess what? I've seen it happen. I've seen people do it. I've seen people work miracles without any action at all, by surrendering and allowing the manifestation. See, our beliefs put blocks on the manifestations. This is part of why so many people try to do manifestation work and it never works, because they're putting blocks on their ability to manifest. And so if we live in our imagination just a little bit, not fully, we don't want to live in a totally imaginary world, but we want to spend time there. It's the most powerful tool in your arsenal. And we're taught from the time we're children, use your imagination, use your imagination. Then we become teenagers and we start told to shut off the imagination. Then when we become adults, if you're in your imagination as an adult, then all of a sudden you need to stop being childish. You need to stop being, and that's absolutely backwards. We should be teaching people to develop their imagination as they get older, not turn it off and not ignore it and not shut it down, because it's the most powerful tool we have in our arsenal for manifestation work, for moving our energy, for changing our lives. So much of the work that we do in meditation is really, if you're talking about visualization, we're talking about using the imagination. And by the way, for those of you that want to deny this whole thing about the imagination, it's already destroying your life right now. Because I want you to think about this. Every time you worry about something that could go wrong, you're using your imagination to hurt yourself and everyone around you. Every time you worry about somebody maybe getting hurt, you're using your imagination to imagine a potential negative outcome in the future. Every time you're dwelling on the past, you're using your imagination to reimagine what happened in the past. And often your imagination, if you're not in control of your imagination, it's twisting and warping that vision of the past. So your actual memory of the past isn't actually what happened. Your imagination is constantly twisting it, and your new experiences twist and change that understanding of what happened in your past. Now you can do this controllably in a way that you have a better understanding of what happened in the past. You can have a more peaceful understanding of what happened in the past. Whether it's true or not, you can use your imagination to let go of that pain and fear. Or you can do what most people do and make it worse and worse and worse as your life goes on, so that the thing that was just a little minor incident in your life turns into this big, huge trauma and tragedy in the future that destroys your life. And I see people doing this almost every day, and they have no freaking idea, and they refuse to admit it's all their imagination. The only thing that's real is the present, right here, right now. If you're thinking about the past or thinking about the future, you are using your imagination. Now, the question is, are you controlling how you use your imagination? Are you taking responsibility for how you use your imagination? Or are you just letting it randomly go? Because if you're just randomly letting it go, your subconscious mind is controlling your imagination, not your intentionality. You are not using intentionality in your imagination, and so it's running wild and rampant, and that's why you're manifesting so many things you don't like in your life, and that's also why you can't manifest an energy ball. It's why you can't manifest moving from one place to another with just your thought. It's why you can't manifest flying from here to the grocery store. The only thing that's stopping us from being able to do these things in our physical reality is power and the ability to control our own imagination and the group consciousness. The group consciousness has to evolve to a degree for it to come into consciousness as a whole. It can't just be something we reach on an individual. I can reach that level of consciousness individually and still not be able to do it because the group consciousness does not allow for it yet. So as we evolve in consciousness, more and more of these abilities are going to start showing up in people's lives, and more people are going to start realizing that these things can happen. It may take a few hundred years, but this is part of where our consciousness is going. I hope that this rabbit hole's a little bit fun. I hope I don't scare everybody up too much with my ramblings and rants and weird imaginations. I gotta go hide from the guys in little white coats before they lock me away for the rest of my life. We'll see you in the next video.